Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is 5:30 in the morning. That means it is time for coffee and sketching. I don't have coffee this morning. I have tea. Somebody failed to set the coffee up last night, and so when I came down this morning, there was no coffee, and so life sucks. No, life does not suck. I just don't have any coffee. Anyway, this is when we take out. I have about 400 of these little canisters full of toys. This is when we take one out. We throw it up here on the stage and we draw it. I have provided a reference image for you. You can occasionally see it to the side of the video, and there's a link for it in the chat if you would like to click on that link and draw along with me. I am recording for anybody who's keeping track of such things, and today we have a walrus, so let's turn the page and get started. And I have been singing this song all morning long, and Claudia is in the chat. Claudia says she's never heard this song. I can't play the song because copyright issues, but it's a Beatles song. I Am the Walrus. I believe it's on the White Album. It could be on Abbey Road, but I believe it is on the White Album. I am he as you are, me as you are, we are all together. Anyway, it's a wild song. I'm a huge Beatles fan, so I will probably still come out dropping a few lines from the song throughout the show today. I can't help myself. You know, this is supposed to be the composition phase, but it's so easy just to jump right into the details, especially on something that appears so simple. And this is like drawing a worm or a hedgehog. The shape, the little pinniped here with his little tubular body and these little fins on the front and back. It's just like drawing a snail, or not a snail, but a worm. Which way does that go? It's going kind of out. Yeah, kind of out. And that tooth is going that way. That tooth is going that way. Yeah, the composition phase went real quick. Just kind of jumped right into the details. I think we're good there. I did learn some interesting things about Walrus last night. I like to, when I pull these things out and I throw them up there on the stage, I like to zip over to like Wikipedia and learn stuff about them. Like I'll learn the etymology of their name. I'll learn the historical account of how they discovered them, what the native population called them, how they fit into human society, if they fit into human society. And walruses don't, she says, don't make my break too short. Okay, I won't. I promise. We're gonna stick going to stick with this for a while. Walruses have an interesting thing, Claudia, that they were either named by Vikings or by the Dutch, because they found two sources of the name walrus, and one of them is the Viking. The Viking name was initially it was horse wall, but it was Forswald, but it was and I'm going to be horrible at pronunciation because I read it. It's not like I heard Vikings say it, but through alliteration it became Walrus. And it was, what did it mean? It doesn't mean horse wall. It means like seahorse, shore horse, horse of the beach, versus the Dutch version, which was Walrus, which is shore giant. And they're not sure which one it is, if it's not both. Because it's entirely possible that the Vikings heard the Dutch say it, but not speaking Dutch, they heard it as seahorse, or that the Vikings said it and the Dutch overheard it, and the Dutch, not speaking Norse, translated it as shore giant. They're not sure which happened first. But that is the kind of stuff that takes me down the rabbit hole and stops me going to bed when I'm supposed to. Alright, now let's clean up some stray lines so we don't end up shading something that doesn't exist. That shadow, I can already tell you that shadow is too thick. It needs to come in and it needs to come back down to there. It needs to do that. So we've got some stray lines to take care of here. Their teeth grow their whole lives. Claudia's in the chat asking, was it Claudia? Yeah, Claudia was in the chat asking about what age their teeth grow. Their teeth start coming in when they're around 1. Their teeth are a important part of their diet because they use them to dredge the sea bottom. And then they dig with their snout. They dig with their snout like a pig to get the mollusks. They eat the mollusks. Which I wonder if they actually knew that when Lewis Carroll was writing the poem The Walrus and the Carpenter. I wonder if they knew that mollusks were the main staple of their diet. Because in the poem, the walrus eats all the oysters. The carpenter and the walrus trick the oysters onto the shore. And while the carpenter is preparing the butter, the walrus eats all the oysters. And I wonder, again, if they actually knew that at the time that Lewis Carroll wrote the poem, or if he was just writing a poem about walruses, about that particular walrus stealing the poem. If it was just a happy coincidence, stealing the oysters. If it might just have been a happy coincidence that walruses will indeed steal your oysters. They used them to fight. They used them to punch holes in the ice. They used them to display for males, for mating rather. They used them for dredging the sea bottom. They used them for scratching itches. They used them for climbing out of the water. That was an interesting thing. They used them to climb out of the water. They stab the ice as they climb out of the water. When they're getting up on the ice shelf, they stab the ice with their tusks to help pull themselves out of the water. Like I said, I will go down rabbit holes and be up until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, following up on trivia. Wrinkly skin where it folds. They're related to a bear. They're believed to have a common ancestor with bears. All pinnipeds. Where whales have relationships with horses, pinnipeds are believed to be related to bears. I have stray lines here that I did not clean up earlier. I stopped like 3 times to clean up those stray lines and I did not do it. And now I'm sitting here trying to shade them. Trying to figure out why my So they believe that pinnipeds, which are the sea lions, the seals, the walruses, the elephant seals, they believe that pinnipeds are related to bears. The genetic markers they share genetic markers with bears. Claudia is in the chat asking who's related to bears. How do they know? There's no knowing. They can only hypothesize. It's not like they said, "Who's your daddy?" and the walrus said, "Well, we have to have a Maury Povich show about that because I don't know." And then Maury Povich comes out and says, "You, polar bear, are not the father." It doesn't happen that way. But they have genetic markers. Things like mitochondrial DNA that does not change from mother to offspring. So, it's pretty interesting. Where whales are believed to be related to horses. We're trying to capture those wrinkles in that skin because they have contact shadows. Every one of those wrinkles has a contact shadow. But we also want to make sure and preserve this reflected light on the back so that you read the walrus as round. Don't have that reflected light, you'll just read it as a flat plane, and we don't want that. Alright, still need to clean up some lines here. But yeah, I do get a kick out of chasing all that information down. I have a very trivial mind. So now we have a contact shadow across here. But walrus is darker than the shadow. See, even next look, he's got a segmented body like a worm. He's got muscles back here where his legs would be. He's got an abdomen area right here for a thorax. He's got an abdomen right here, and then he's got kind of a thorax area right here. Yeah, he's even segmented like an insect, like a worm. But especially on this side, the walrus is darker than the shadow because of all the reflected light around. All of this reflected light coming back into the shadow. Not to mention the toy has colorization on it. Of course, I just mentioned it. Can't say not to mention and then mention it. That's not how not to mention works. This shadow, the whole head part of this shadow is giving me fits because it is not where it should be. It should be that tusk shadow is coming right out of that shoulder, going back this way. And then this is doing this. And then this is coming back like this. Just giving me fits. I think that's better. It still may not be far enough out there. Hi, for Copic. Alright, we don't have any. You would think this would be a contact shadow, but I really don't think. Yeah, it's not touching. So where there would have been a contact shadow from my angle, I really can't see it. But right in here, this shadow right here really blends in with the colorization of the flipper. So I have to be careful with that. I'm not really going to worry too much about that. It looks like I'm scribbling. I'm not scribbling. I'm only going one direction. I'm coming in light on this side and I'm adding pressure as I go so that the back of the shadow is darker than the area closest to the walrus. And I'm doing that, and when I go the other way, when I get closer to the walrus, I'm actually going to overlap the walrus so that the walrus is darker than the shadow. And what that'll preserve is it'll preserve a highlight in the middle of the shadow where the light is bouncing back into the shadow, in theory. And that helps for the whole thing to read as round. And then on the back of the walrus, it helps if you keep the shading in the direction of the wrinkles of the skin. And so you end up with a little walrus like that. Ah, there's Elizabeth also. Elizabeth missed the conversation about the source of the name for walruses being possibly Dutch. Elizabeth is also Dutch. She's a... Do you call yourselves Dutch or Netherlanders? Does anybody call you Netherlanders, or where would I even hear a term like that? Where would I even come up with a term like that? Netherlanders. I thought so. So yeah, Claudia or Elizabeth, we were talking earlier that the name walrus is either a Viking term, a Norse term, which basically means seahorse, or it's Dutch, that means shoreline giant. Because initially it was the oldest writing they find calls it a Forsval, but that gets alliterated to Walfors. And forgive my pronunciation because I can only, I've only ever read it. But that's the Norse version, and then the Dutch version is Walrus, which is shore giant. And then the question becomes whether the Dutch overheard the Norse and translated into something they understood, or the Norse overheard the Dutch and translated it into something they understood. Nobody knows. Nobody knows which came first. It's not a chicken and the egg thing. We know the eggs came first because chickens are hybrids bred specifically for farms. And eggs have been around for millions of years before chickens. It's a Valforce or Valreus issue. And then, continuing down the rabbit hole, I find it interesting that the Dutch word for giant was reus. And it makes me wonder if there's any relationship between that and Ray for king. See what I mean about rabbit holes? I just go down the rabbit hole. And there's nobody's researching that kind of stuff. There's no somebody look up how you say walrus in Spanish. That can be our Spanish word of the day. Walrus. Oh, I still have it set for Vietnamese because one of my passengers yesterday was Vietnamese. Morsa, which is a sea cow. Morsa. Okay. I'm calling this one. I think we're about there. The only thing that's still about this sketch that is going to plague me is that those teeth, those tusks, are super white, and the only way to fix that would be to shade everything else. So I may tint the paper. because otherwise it's going to haunt me. When you do, you have to be sure and overlap your shading onto the drawing, so that the drawing changes tint also. But we did that just so the tusks would read white. Now I can come back in and I can make sure that the tusks have shading they're supposed to have. I can come back in and I can add some highlights to the walrus himself. Males and females grow tusks. The male tusks are often just a little thicker and stronger, but not so much that you could tell from across the beach. You have to be pretty close to notice that. Infants start growing their tusks pretty early on because they nurse for almost 2 years, but they start feeding off the seabed at about a year, at which point they need their tusks because they kind of dredge the bottom of the seabed with their tusks, and then they use their snout like a pig to dig the oysters out of the seabed, dig the mollusks out of the seabed. Just adding some highlights. I feel like this should be a more defined shape. All right, I'm calling it. He says as he goes back in to make more marks. Oh, hey, what's happened here? Something's happened here. There we go. Because there's no shadow there. There we go. I'm calling it. What is today? It's time to go. It is the 29th of April. Well, I mean, Claudia's in the chat talking about the poor mama with the tusks and the feeding from her. I mean, they would press up flat against her, right? Because the mouth is actually here, upper lip is here, so the tusk would just press up tight against her. I'm sure they know what they're doing. All right, we got to get the pictures. Ah! Safely eject the camera. Stand him up just a little bit so you can see him from the same perspective that I can see the reference photo, and then you can see it the same way I see it. If I go to this camera. So there we go. It's a nice little walrus pinniped, nice little chat about walruses. And that's going to do it for today. I really appreciate everybody turning up. Got a couple of new people this morning. What was her name? I remember seeing her. Where did she go? Something okay. For Copic. For Copic okay. And then we got our Claudia. We got our Elizabeth from the Netherlands. And then we dance. We dance until somebody says they see me dancing, so that we know the lag is cut up. And I think Claudia just likes to see me dance. But these sexy dance moves are how I was able to attract my wife. She said anybody brave enough to move like that in public is brave enough for me. Alright guys, you guys have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 5:30. Same Artistic Biker time, same Artistic Biker channel. I can see me dancing on the live feed, so I know it is caught up.